Sorry for being a couple minutes tardy. I apologize. I don't have anything off at the top today, so Sean, you want to take us off?
Sure. I'm sure most people want to talk about Gaza first, but first, can I just ask you about Hong Kong?
Sure.
In Hong Kong, there's the approval by the legislature of the security law. Some rights groups have said that this will further clamp down on free expression, on media freedom. Does the United States even have a reaction or any preview of things it might do as a result of this?
Certainly, Sean. We believe that these kinds of actions have the potential to accelerate the closing of Hong Kong's once open society. We're alarmed by the sweeping and what we interpret as vaguely defined provisions laid out in their Article 23 legislation. We think that this was fast-tracked through the non-democratically elected Legislative Council after a truncated public comment period. We also believe that a lot of the phrasing and crimes that are outlined are poorly defined and incredibly vague. They use phrases such as external interference, which is incredibly vague. So we're analyzing this legislation, and we are taking a look at what the potential risk could be to not just U.S. citizens, but other American interests that we might have.
Sure. And just want to follow up on that.
Yeah.
There have been calls, in particular from the Hill, for the U.S. to stop treating Hong Kong entirely as a separate entity that's been more integrated into the PRC. Is there any policy change you think that will happen as a result of this?
I don't want to speculate or go down any rabbit hole of a sort of potential outcome, Sean. But what I can say is that we're not going to hesitate to call out those responsible for the erosion of Hong Kong's promised autonomy. And when we see things like this that happen, we won't hesitate to not just use our voice, but should the circumstances require it, use other actions that the United States has at its disposal. But I'm not in a place or to announce any policy change or anything like that.
Sure. Let me switch to Gaza, unless anybody else wants to talk about Hong Kong. A few things, but the UN Human Rights Chief, Mr. Turk, said to say that Israel may be using food or lack of food as a weapon of war, which of course would be a war crime. Does the U.S. have a reaction to his remarks?
So let me just say that is not something that we have observed or witnessed, but we continue to be deeply concerned about the report that's indicating that famine is imminent in Gaza. This report makes clear that the amount of aid reaching the people in Gaza is insufficient, and that more needs to be done. We need to redouble our efforts to ensure that aid can get to the places that it needs to go. Both, you heard me talk about this a little bit yesterday, via land routes, via airdrops, and this forthcoming maritime corridor as well. There is a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that this kind of aid can get to the kind of places that it needs to go. I will just also add, though, Sean, that yesterday we saw 69 trucks enter via Rafah. In response to, I believe, Simon's question yesterday, I spoke about an 18-truck convoy making its way from the south to the north, and we've also seen reports of 182 trucks entering yesterday via Kerem Shalom. These are all helpful metrics and good steps in the right direction, but to echo again what I said yesterday, more needs to be done to help address this stark and devastating reality in Gaza right now.
Just to follow up on that,
Yeah.
Of course you mentioned things that are being done to include by the United States to alleviate the situation, but why is it that the U.S. disagrees with the assessment of Mr. Turk that it's being used as a weapon of war?
Because we're seeing aid and food and these kinds of provisions enter Gaza. They are not entering at the rate or clip that they need to be. They are not entering fast enough. They are not getting to the places that they need to go. And that's why we've called for more. But I'm not in a place to offer any kind of like legal or geopolitical assessment, and it's certainly not one that we have seen or characterized.
Just one more before I turn over to colleagues, but I was wondering if you have any follow-up on the conversation we had yesterday about the UNRWA chief, Mr. Lazzarini. Do you have anything more to say yesterday, so that you're basically deferring comment on it? Does the United States see anything abnormal about him not being let.
So, as it relates to the specific incident, I will let the United Nations and Israel speak to that specifically. But to just say more broadly, all regional governments need to do what is necessary to enable the humanitarian response. And this, of course, includes allowing the free movement of international staff and the freedom of this movement to help with that kind of response. Commissioner General Lazzarini and UN staff, our belief is that they should be able to visit UNRWA's fields of operation, including in Gaza. And we're going to continue to work with the government of Israel to rapidly approve all requested visas for UN and NGO workers in an expeditious fashion.
That actually sounds fairly specific. I mean, is there a call for Israel actually to rapidly approve Mr. Lazzarini's entry?
Again, I don't want to speak to that situation in specificity because I'm not aware of the circumstances of what transpired and why he was specifically denied entry. But I will just echo again that we believe that the free movement of international workers is a key part of the humanitarian response, and Mr. Lazzarini and his staff, we believe, should be able to assess their operations. And so we're going to continue to work with the government of Israel and other appropriate interlocutors to push for that to happen. Simon?
If we can come to so the call between the president and Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday, obviously that's the White House, but this speaks to broader U.S. policy. So you've sort of talked about, it's been talked about from this podium, that the offensive in Rafah would be disastrous, and that seems to be, the warning is even made even more strongly on this call yesterday. But Prime Minister Netanyahu has said today they're determined to complete an elimination of the Hamas battalions in Rafah. There's no way to do that except by going in on the ground. So, do you have any response to basically this pushback to what U.S. government is trying to tell the Israelis?
It should come as no surprise that when it comes to this, we are just squarely in a different place and have a different viewpoint than our Israeli partners. You saw National Security Advisor Sullivan speak about this a little bit yesterday. But I will also note that in this very same call, President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed to have their teams meet, for them to meet soon here in Washington to exchange views and discuss alternative approaches that would target the key elements of Hamas, help secure the Egypt-Gaza border, and do so without a major ground operation in Rafah. We continue to feel quite strongly that such an operation in Rafah, where there are more than 1 million people seeking refuge, a region that continues to be a key conduit for the entrance of humanitarian aid, that doing something like that without a credible and clear plan, something that without a plan that also doesn't address for the various humanitarian pieces, would be a disaster. And we hope that through this mechanism, our officials will be able to discuss some of these issues in greater detail and find a path forward.
And so in that mechanism, there will be, what you're saying is the US will have some suggestions of how, basically Netanyahu is saying it's not possible to do it without a ground operation. You're saying it is, so you're going to give them ideas on how to do it.
I don't want to get ahead of the process here, Simon. We'll have an exchange of views with them and discuss approaches that we think are in line with our shared objective of degrading Hamas and ensuring that October 7th can no longer be repeated, while simultaneously also being cognizant, mindful, respectful of the more than 1 million people seeking refuge in Rafah, and being mindful of the important conduit that Rafah continues to be for humanitarian aid.
Are you able to say when that meeting is going to be?
I don't have any scheduling updates at this moment.
Thank you.
Camilla?
Thank you. Also, just going back to what National Security Advisor Sullivan was talking about yesterday, he implied that there hasn't been a response from Israel on the president's national security memorandum. I was wondering whether you could confirm whether or not Israel has responded with a letter to that effect, and if you could give us a bit more information on the what next when they respond.
As it relates to individual countries and their communications with us, as it relates to the National Security Memorandum, I will defer to those other countries to speak to those pieces. I don't want to get into those details on an internal processes from here, nor do I want to speak for other countries. But as you all recall, this was signed on February 8th, and as laid out quite clearly in the text of the National Security Memorandum, there are 45 days for countries to offer an assurance via a letter as it relates to the provision of U.S. Lethal assistance. And in that time, after receiving that assurance, the United States also, through close coordination with the interagency as well as close consultation with our relevant embassies and consulates, will take a look at that that certification that is provided to us.
Can you confirm to whether or not Israel has responded?
I'm just not going to speak to individual countries as it relates to an entire memorandum. Go ahead, Julian.
Haiti, couple questions.
Can I see if anybody else has anything on Gaza, and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just following up on what Sean was asking on the famine. You're saying you don't see that famine is imminent in Gaza.
That is literally not what I said, Saeed.
Okay.
I think in the very first thing I said in response to Sean's question is that
I just want to understand it. Maybe I couldn't hear
the question was you can actually just read the transcript if you want to see what Sean's specific question was. But let me just echo again. We are deeply concerned about the report that indicate that famine is imminent in Gaza.
Right, thank you. Because there was actually a report by Samantha Power saying that, it is imminent. So
I think it was
glad
a
you
press release.
Clarified that. I have a couple of other questions. The Wall Street Journal reported that Israel is going to expropriate or steal, as they called it, 16% of Gaza for a buffer zone. Is that something that you're aware of, or is that something that would be acceptable to the administration, considering that the administration said time and again that Gaza should not be reduced in size?
That's absolutely right. You have heard me and the Secretary and Matt be very clear that there must be no reduction in territory of Gaza, that Israel needs to comply with international law and any measures it takes to defend itself, and it needs to take every feasible step to protect civilian harm. We certainly appreciate Israel's need for security, especially since October 7th, but again, let me just be very clear that there can be no reduction in territory of Gaza.
So the administration would never agree to the concept of a buffer zone?
That is not something that is the kind of thing that would run contrary to one of the key principles that Secretary Blinken laid out in Tokyo last fall.
All right. There was also an article in the Washington Post that said that the president and the administration knew very well, early on, in a meeting on the 27th of October, that Israel was purposely targeting Palestinian civilians. Are you aware of that report? Have you seen it?
I'm just not going to comment on any hearsay side. We have been very clear with our Israeli partners that they need to do more to improve its deconfliction mechanisms, that more must be done to minimize civilian casualties, and more needs to be done to protect the well-being of Palestinian civilians. And that's something that we'll continue to echo and raise with them at every opportunity.
So you think that the administration was surprised by the amount of civilian casualties, was unaware that the Israelis were targeting purposely?
I'm not going to engage in reporting that is hearsay and rooted in internal deliberative assessments.
And lastly, now you said that you want to make sure, or the administration wants to make sure, that October 7 could never be repeated again, because it falls under Israel's right to defend itself and all that stuff. Now, we know that it's been reported in the last couple of days that the Israelis have distributed something like 100,000 pieces of small arms to settlers, to basically defend themselves. My question to you, do Palestinians have the right to defend themselves? And in what form should the Palestinians defend themselves?
Are you talking about in what context are you speaking about, Saeed?
I'm saying that the Palestinians are being assaulted time and time and time again. I mean, Israel attacked Gaza, unlike what many people like to think, that the whole issue began on October 7. Israel has struck Gaza time and time again for decades before that, right?
Let me just say two things, Said. When we talk about Israel having the right to defend itself and Israel having the right to security, what we're talking about is defending itself from terrorist groups like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who have a track record of carrying out terrorist attacks on the people of Israel as recently as, I'd point you no further than October 7th. When it comes to the expansions of settlements and activities from settlers, which we find insightful, dangerous, reckless, we have not parsed our words. I recall just a number of weeks ago in which the Secretary spoke quite clearly about our viewpoint that we find the expansion of settlements to be inconsistent with international law. We believe that these kinds of activities run contrary to Israel's security, and they run contrary to what we hope is a shared goal of a two-state solution where Israelis and Palestinians can have equal measures of justice and peace and security, and that's what we're going to continue.
What about the military raid night after night? That go in with half tracks and sometimes helicopters, Apache helicopters, and so on, and even with drones and armed assaults and so on. Do they have the right to defend themselves against such military assaults?
Said, what we're talking about is you're using examples of our partners in Israel conducting legitimate security operations that are in the interest of their self-defense and the interest of security. All right, anything else on Gaza? Go ahead. And I promise I will get to you, Jillian. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vinant. There was a Washington Post investigation published today about the killing of our freelancers, Al Jazeera freelancers in Gaza, Mustafa and Hamza, and they, Washington Post also sought the help of experts in this investigation, and they found out that the reasons the Israelis give for this, it happens on January 7th, is not consistent with evidence that they found. I don't know if you saw this report, but it shows, according to Washington Post, that there was no Israeli military presence around them, both of them. They were alone. They were conducting a story for us. And they were targeted and killed both in January 7. And I remember, I was in Tel Aviv at that time, but I remember Matt was asked here in this room about if they reached to the Israeli partners for clarification. And he said that you did. And I'm asking you here, did you hear back from them?
I don't have any updates for you. First, let me just say, though, you heard me talk a little bit about this yesterday. We believe that journalists and the right to free speech needs to be protected, and especially in the situation, in the context of what's happening in Gaza, journalism is more important than ever. I will also say that we've been crystal clear that Israel needs to treat all detainees humanely and with dignity and in full accordance with international law. Go ahead. On Gaza?
Yes, on Gaza.
All right.
Vedant, why you are talking publicly about your disagreement with the Israeli, and this is a departure from your policy, is it because you don't have any kind of leverage? What are you trying to tell us?
Have you been to any State Department briefings?
Yes,
in the
I
past
have been, yes.
Couple months? Are you sure?
I mean, I'm not talking about this month. I'm talking lately. At the beginning, you were very reluctant in talking publicly about the disagreement.
That's not true. That I would just respectfully disagree with the premise of your question. Dating back to October, we have been clear-eyed about a couple things. First, we have been clear-eyed that Israel has every right to defend itself, that Israel's right to security is something that we agree with. We also agree with every step must be possible. Every step must be taken to degrade Hamas, so such an event like October 7th can't be repeated. We also, when it has come to the provision of humanitarian aid, when we've talked about the protection and well-being of Palestinian civilians, and even recently, in the context of Rafah, when we have had disagreements on policy, disagreements on course of action, we've not hesitated to say those and raise those privately, but when we're asked about them in this briefing room or when the secretary takes questions from you, we've not hesitated to make our point of view from the United States of America, from the State Department, crystal clear.
Just I want to clarify why I'm asking this question, because yesterday Jake Sullivan, when he was laying down the arguments why the administration doesn't support a military operation in Rafah, he said instead of stabilizing areas, they are planning. This kind of criticism didn't come publicly this way before.
I'm not sure that I would interpret. I saw the National Security Advisor's comments as well. I'm not sure I would categorize those as criticisms either. Look, in the context of what we believe needs to happen with Rafah, we just have a different viewpoint. We have a different strategic viewpoint on what we believe is necessary to help target the key elements of Hamas. And our goal is, through this meeting that the Prime Minister and President Biden spoke about on their call, we hope that we'll be able to have an exchange of views and discuss an alternative approach that, like I said, will target the key elements of Hamas, secure this border in the Rafah area, but also not negatively impact the more than 1 million people who are seeking refuge in the area, not negatively impact the important work that's being done to further enhance the flow of humanitarian aid. Anything else on Gaza before I go back to Jillian, who's been patiently waiting on Gaza? Okay, go ahead.
2 quick questions on
Sure.
the aid drops.
Yeah.
Question number 1, U.S. officials have said that the rations airdropped in Gaza are pork-free, but I wanted to ask, was it...
Are what?
Pork-free, like there's no pork products. But I wanted to ask, was it ensured that all of the food provided was halal, including preservatives and such? And then question number 2 is, it also seems that the packaging was labeled in English. Was there any Arabic language material provided in those aid rations, including
so,
food
as it relates
names
to both of
and
your questions,
instructions on how to prepare
as it
them?
relates to both of your questions, I don't have the technical level of detail. I will just say, if we've previously stated that that these rations are pork free, I would have no reason not to say that that's accurate. And in all of these circumstances, we try to be incredibly mindful of the local culture and food customs when it comes to these things, but I'm happy to check with the team if we have a more specific answer we can give you. Jillian, go ahead.
Republican of Florida, Corey Mills, saying today that his office has evacuated 23 Americans out of the capital in Haiti. Wondering if that is something that was coordinated with the State Department, if it's an action that you support.
So look, we are relieved when any American citizen is able to make its way to safety. We, of course, closely coordinate with Congress on a number of issues, but I will just note that operations like these that are sort of done deviating from formal State Department operations, they can be high risk. We're talking about a country that's been a level 4 do not travel country since 2020. And so we want to make sure that we are not that actions that are taken are not further inciting additional risk or putting individuals into harm's way. But again, we find it welcome news when any American citizen makes its way to safety. I will just note, from the State Department's perspective, you're aware of the operation that was conducted over the weekend that was able to facilitate the safe departure of over 30 U.S. citizens. We continue to explore options that we have at our disposal when it comes to American citizens interested in departing Haiti from specifically the Port-au-Prince area, and we'll remain in touch with American citizens who have expressed an interest in staying in touch with the embassy and learning about options through not just our crisis intake form, but Smart Traveler and the other mechanisms we have at our disposal.
Yesterday, you had said that nearly 1,000 people have registered through the portal, the website. Any update on those numbers, or Americans generally in Haiti?
Let me say 2 things. First, when we talk about individual of the population of people who register. We have to remember not everyone who registers with this form or contacts us necessarily is requesting departure assistance. Some just want to stay in touch with the embassy. Some just want to see what information we have to share with them, advice on how they may be able to remain safely, and to potentially stay in touch if they choose to potentially depart in the future. Like in any country around the world, we do not ask American citizens to register with the U.S. government when they travel abroad. So numbers of how many American citizens are in X amount of country is always, they always vary and they're constantly changing, but the embassy uses estimates from smart traveler enrollments and from other measures to have a rough number to work with. I will note that in terms of our crisis intake form, the number continues to be approaching 1,000, and we'll continue to remain in touch with those American citizens to answer any questions that they might have.
Thank you. Last question. You mentioned yesterday that there was going to be some action today or communication today with adoption agencies. We've been hearing from American parents who say that they have adopted children who are stuck in Haiti. They're unable to get them out because maybe they don't have their U.S. citizenship yet or visas. Any more specific information on what state is doing on that front?
I don't have more specific information. We are continuing to communicate with adoption agencies as well as prospective families regarding recent developments and assessing the situation as it unfolds. We're working with the Haitian government to figure out what options are for children at the various stages in the adoption process, and we're working through individual inquiries as well as working and collaborating closely with adoption service partners, but I don't have a more specific breakdown to offer you. As you know, there are limited consular services available given the conditions in the country, but this is something that we're continuing to work through. We recognize how difficult this situation might be, and we encourage prospective parents to remain in regular contact, not just with us through our embassy channels, but also through their adoption service providers. And we encourage everybody to enroll in Smart Traveler to continue to stay up to date as the situation on the ground is quite fluid. Anything else on Haiti before we move away? Then go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On those departure options from Port-au-Prince, potential departure options, I should say, we're in contact with Americans who've received communication from the State Department that there might be helicopter airlifts leaving the capital city for the Dominican Republic. Do you have any updates on that?
I'm not going to speak in specificity to these options, just given operational security, but I would just say that, as I just said, we are exploring options for American citizens to depart Haiti from Port-au-Prince to Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic. From there, American citizens would be responsible for their own onward travel to the United States from Santo Domingo, and we're continuing to look at what options might make sense and what will make the most sense for the impacted American citizens. And we, of course, as this is a very fluid situation on the ground, as more develops, will continue to stay in touch with the impacted folks.
And just a quick follow on the humanitarian condition, of course, it remains very dire and is getting worse. We've seen reports that the capital city may be completely out of food in the next week or so. Is the U.S. doing anything to enable aid to move into Haiti right now?
For those of you that joined us in Kingston, Jamaica last Monday, the Secretary announced an additional $33 million in humanitarian aid. I believe our colleagues at the White House followed that announcement up later in the week for some additional funding that was announced to help address the humanitarian situation in Haiti. The situation is dire and every day matters, and that is why we are hoping as soon as possible our partners at CARICOM, in close coordination with this forthcoming transitional presidential council, announce the members of that council, of who the makeup of that group will be, so that they can take on the very important task of selecting an interim prime minister who can help seek out stability on the ground, work closely with our Kenyan partners on the deployment of the multinational security force, and we'll take this process step by step. Yeah, go ahead.
you mentioned it yesterday as well, the Transitional Council. Do you have any update? I know CARICOM's in the lead, but any update on
I don't at this point. Again, we've been coordinating closely with our partners in CARICOM and its chairman, President Ali of Guyana. I don't have any updates for you, but our hope continues to be that this Transitional Presidential Council is announced as soon as possible. We believe that it is vital to paving the way to not just free and fair elections, but the deployment of this MSS as well. Camilla, I saw you had your hand up on Haiti. Good? Okay. Anything else on Haiti before we move to something else? All right, Alex, go ahead.
Thank you, Beral.
Yeah.
A few questions from me, starting from Russia.
Let's do a couple so we can get to
The Secretary issued a statement on a Russian election. He stopped short calling it undemocratic. Isn't it a bit soft assessment given all the violations, Russian crimes that he depicted in a very statement?
I would not read too much into the word choice, Alex. We believe this to be an undemocratic process. I said so yesterday. It's something that I know the Secretary agrees with.
On the occupied territories, Matt told us last week that the U.S. will use all the available tools to punish those who serve as election observers for the Kremlin's sham election in occupied territories of Ukraine. I know you don't telegraph any sanctions, but are you guys working on it? And secondly, is it going to be limited with Ukraine only, or you will also consider election observers who served in Georgia's and Moldova's occupied territories?
I'm just not going to preview actions, but I just want to use this opportunity to echo that all of those territories, we believe them to be Ukraine.
Thank you. On Ukraine front, does Secretary agree with his European colleagues, most notably, the EU Commission Chair Michel, and also previously French President Macron, that Europe needs to be prepared for war?
Sorry, I didn't understand the first part of your
Europe
question.
needs to be prepared for war if it needs peace. These statements, have been, recently reflected by European leaders. Does Secretary agree with that approach?
So look, we have been very clear that the U.S. is not going to send troops to fight in Ukraine, and NATO Secretary General has also ruled out sending any NATO troops to fight in Ukraine. We believe that the most immediate and helpful path forward to stop Putin's aggression would be for the House of Representatives to pass the National Security Supplemental. So our Ukrainian partners have the weapons and ammunition they need to defend themselves, and they'll continue to fight courageously to defend their democracy and to push back against this infringement on their territorial integrity and sovereignty. Jalil, go ahead. I'm gonna work the.
Thank you very much.
Okay, go ahead.
On South Caucasus, the
Yeah.
Armenian Prime Minister today was quoted as saying that quick border demarcation needed to avoid a war. How alarmed are you right now, given this statement?
Look, this is an issue that we are continuing to pay close attention to. It's something that not just the Secretary, but Assistant Secretary O'Brien, as well as Senior Coordinator Bono, are continuing to focus on, engaging with appropriate interlocutors. I don't have an update for you, though, beyond that. Jalil, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Only two questions, please.
Great.
One question is about these two innocent kids that just got some relief from Pakistani courts today, and the public of Pakistan believes that this administration has a big role in it. These two kids had no money to pay their tuition fee when they were 16, 18 years old, and then just a couple of years later, then they had almost 500 million rupees. They were the children of former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif.
Mm-hmm.
They just got finally acquitted today in the corruption case that was registered against them after Panama Papers. Does the U.S. not feel bad that such corrupt people are back to Pakistan to rule again? And at the same time, Ambassador Bloom is meeting the Pakistani finance minister about the economic situation of Pakistan. These are two very contradictory things happening in Pakistan.
So first, I just don't really have anything for you on a Pakistani court case. That is an internal matter for Pakistan. What I will say, though, is we spoke a little bit about this yesterday in discussing Ambassador Bloom's bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Sharif. There's a number of issues that I'm sure he looks forward to discussing with the finance minister, and so I will let our team in Islamabad speak more about that at its conclusion.
Just
Go ahead.
one.
No.
Just one more.
Go ahead.
Today there is a hearing in Congress on Afghanistan. As you know, Pakistan and Afghanistan had a tussle yesterday, and I have been
Which I
raising
spoke to.
And I have been raising this issue of Taliban expansionism with Matt quite a bit. That today the chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is the next door province to Afghanistan, just got non-bailable arrest warrants for the raids that happened on some military installations. Do you think such situation is still not, this current administration is not seeing this, what is happening in Pakistan is giving a room to the Taliban expansionism in the region?
Well, look, we've been very clear about the fact that we do not want Afghanistan to be or become a safe haven for terrorism. And when it comes to counterterrorism cooperation with our Pakistani partners, that's something we engage with them on quite regularly, including other important bilateral consultations with them as well. Michelle,
Thanks so
go
much.
ahead.
Thanks.
Yeah, Niger, do you have any updates on the talks with the authorities?
I don't have any updates for you. Again, we are remaining in touch with the CNSP and seeking additional clarification of their comments, as well as discussing potential next steps. I'll just reiterate what I said yesterday, is that this was at the conclusion of a meeting with senior U.S. Officials as part of a delegation who were meeting to discuss a number of areas, but also making it quite clear that we believed that the CNSP was heading down a path that we just disagree with and took a lot of issues.
And on Cuba, what's your understanding of what's going on there? Did you track any demonstrations?
So I spoke a little bit about this yesterday, Michelle. We are continuing to monitor the situation closely. There are protests across several cities in Cuba that were calling for electricity, food, and fundamental freedoms, and we are urging the Cuban government to refrain from violence and unjust detentions and calling on authorities to respect Cuban citizens' rights for peaceful assembly.
And do you support demonstrators there?
We stand with the Cuban people and continue to support their demands of human rights, freedom, prosperity, and a future for greater dignity. Go ahead. Yeah.
Russian Foreign Intelligence Chief Naryshkin said today that France is preparing to deploy 2,000 troops to Odessa in Ukraine in the coming days. And there are even some media reports that France has already deployed them to Romania, and they are about to cross the border to Odessa from Romania. Do you see this move as an escalation in the conflict, and do you support it or not?
Well, first, I would just say it would take anything that coming from Russian officials with a grain of salt. Secondly, this is something for our French partners to speak to. If true, I will just echo what I just said to Alex, that President Biden has been incredibly clear that the United States is not prepared to send troops to Ukraine, and that is something that the NATO Secretary General has also echoed as well. Go ahead.
One more.
I'm going to work the room a little bit. Go ahead.
Could you please elaborate on Thomas West's trip to UAE in India? Is he meeting the Taliban officials this time?
I'm happy to check with the team and get back to you.
And second, tomorrow is the first day of New Year in Afghanistan, and normally schools are open for the kids. But this is third year girls are banned from school. Is the U.S. pushing these topics, including the other topics, with their meeting with the Taliban officials? And last question, I'm repeating my last week's question. Could you please give us some information that the Taliban officials are asking for those military airplanes that they were taking to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan in 2001 when Kabul collapsed? They say this belongs to Afghanistan, but U.S. is not allowing them to be brought back to Afghanistan. What's the U.S. stance on this?
On the last question, I don't have an update for you, but I'm happy to check with the team. And on your first question, look, the fair treatment of Afghan women and girls continues to be one of our highest priorities when it comes to our engagements on policy as it relates to Afghanistan. We also believe that this is something that should be important to the so-called Taliban government, and think that it is vital when talking about their own stated desire for international recognition. And so the fact that this is another year in which Afghan women and girls don't have access to these kinds of schools, it's heartbreaking and it's troubling. Goyle, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Two questions, please. One, as far as elections in Russia and Pakistan, both were widely reported in the media and criticized by their citizens because there was no opposition in Russia and there was no opposition in Pakistan, or opposition leader is still in jail. So what's the difference between the two elections?
I'm sorry.
Election in Russia, election in Pakistan.
Well, I would take a little bit of issue with comparing both of those democratic processes. One, I will just say that Pakistan's a country that has a little bit more of a robust media landscape, open for dissenting ideas and opinions. But ultimately, the point is, Goyle, is that these are decisions that should be made by the people of these countries, and the people of these countries should have choices. They should have access to information that will help inform their decision making when it comes to who they want to lead their country and the direction that they want to take their country in. And I will just say that as it relates to Russia, there is a clear track record of media suppression, of silencing dissenting voices.
Second one, sir.
Oh,
sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry for that.
Yeah.
As far as China is concerned, I have been saying this for the last over 25 years that one day, someday, China will be a national security threat to the United States. And today, we are hearing from every angle how much China is threat to the national security today. And we're talking about TikTok and many other things that stealings and copying and everything is going on against the United States as far as national security is concerned.
So, Goyle, let me just say that when it comes to our relations with the PRC, you've heard the Secretary say this. We want to ensure that we are taking steps to hold the PRC accountable for actions that we find to be coercive, that actions that we find to be destabilizing not just in the Indo-Pacific region, but also around the world more broadly. And we won't hesitate to take appropriate actions to hold them accountable. I will also just note, though, that in the areas like climate cooperation, in areas like addressing the synthetic opioid crisis, we think that there are avenues for cooperation with the PRC. You're seeing a direct result of that, at least in the synthetic opioid space, as a direct result of President Biden's summit with President Xi in San Francisco. So beyond that, ultimately, Goyle, our approach to this is that this is a relationship we want to manage responsibly, because that is what is expected of international powers. And
Thank you,
go
sir.
ahead, Sean.
Sure.
Thank you.
Two things somewhat specific. Kosovo, the president of Kosovo says that there's an agreement on what she's described as a U.S. proposal to use euros for Serbian payments to Serbs in Kosovo, as opposed to dinars. Is that something you can?
Are you referring to the EU facilitated dialogue in Brussels, or
sort of? Yeah. She said that Gabriel Escobar was there and headed it.
So I will just say broadly, and I'm happy to check with the team on your specific question about euros, but these are talks that we welcome, and they are taking place within the framework of the EU facilitated dialogue in Brussels today, and they include a discussion of the new central bank of Kosovo's currency regulations, and we believe that these discussions should continue with urgency. The EU facilitated dialogue is the proper channel for resolving these issues related to the normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. We've also been clear in expressing our concerns that this new regulation that restricts the import and use of the Serbian dinar in Kosovo. We've expressed some concerns about this, and we've also reiterated our calls to both Kosovo and Serbia to de-escalate tensions.
Okay, so those concerns are continuing, with the Serbians.
Exactly.
It's just something completely different.
Yeah.
I know it's a few days old, but the South African foreign minister is in town. The opposition in South Africa had written a letter to the secretary asking for election observers. I'm not sure if state directly does that, but election observers for the upcoming elections there. And of course, the ANC was and the government were critical of that. Does the U.S. have a stance on whether there's a point of sending U.S. observers to the election in South Africa?
I will have to check on the team with that, Sean. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.